So what is Tempe Accelerates?
This is a wonderful opportunity to give the presenters and the various areas that are presenting your comments. That's really what this is all about. This is a constructive process to help all the different areas of the city come together and help us all achieve our goals.
Tempe Accelerates is a way to present our overarching goals and achievements to make Tempe a better place.
We will be discussing the cardiac arrest survival rates and our council priority of being safe and secure.
These measurable goals operationalize the 5 council priorities for our cities, such as safe and secure communities, quality of life, sustainable growth and development, financial stability and vitality, and strong community connections.
So our performance measure is number 4.11 to achieve a tree canopy of 25 trees per acre on our as an average on our city properties.
This is an opportunity for the community and Tempe employees to participate by offering ideas and solutions, as well as asking questions about how to reach our targets.
I'm going to talk about 2 performance measures that focus on energy. The first one is energy reduction. So this is a dashboard showing the Kiwanis Recreation Center after the solar carports were installed, and the pink area shows you all the energy consumption at the Kiwanis Rec Center, and the green bars show the solar panels, the solar energy production.
The sessions consist of presentations from different departments and partners that show the goal's current measure as well as our target for the future. The departments also discuss the efforts and strategies we are making in order to achieve our desired performance.
And so we have a very visionary goal, and that is to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes to 0.
So we're here to talk about feeling of safety in parks, and the specific council priority that looks at or is under is safe and secure communities.
Join us for Tempe Accelerates, a series of data-driven collaborative strategy sessions to explore how these goals help the community and what we can do to reach our targets.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session of Tempe Accelerates. My name is Andrew Ching. I'm the city manager for the city of Tempe. Very glad to have you here for another hour's worth of presentations and conversation about how we can better achieve the goals for our community. Today we have 2 presentations on performance measure 5.12 cybersecurity and 5.14 audit completion rate. Each of these presentations will be approximately 10 minutes each. We will invite you to suggest strategies in the Q&A feature of the Teams application, and we will have the presenters discuss after the presentation. You can find that feature in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. A feedback survey will be available on our website. We will provide the link in the Q&A, and we would appreciate you filling that out. In addition, we will provide links to our performance measures dashboard so you can explore and join us in achieving positive outcomes for our community. Now, during this virtual presentation, there may be some time delays or technical challenges as we go through the presentations, and we appreciate your patience as we work through any of those. First, let's welcome our initial team of presenters regarding performance measure 5.12 cybersecurity. We have with us today Scott Campbell, Info Security Manager, and Mark Wittenberg, the Deputy Internal Services Director for IT. Take it away, Scott and Mark.
Hello, I'm Scott Campbell, Information Security Manager.
And hello, everybody. I'm Mark Wittenberg. I'm the Deputy Internal Services Director over Information Technology, and here to talk to you today about cybersecurity. So let's get it started. So first of all, Scott and I are here because cybersecurity takes a lot of eyes on it because there are just so many threats out there. Actually, heard of a couple new ones today. So it really is important that Scott and I are on the same page and just in alignment so that we can keep the city of Tempe safe. Next slide, please. So what is our performance measure? And our performance measure is to achieve 100% compliance with a couple of standards. So this kind of looks like a little bit alphabet soup. So let me talk about what is a cybersecurity framework. And the cybersecurity framework is really a security posture or those technical controls that help us to measure how we're doing. And then the next piece of that is the NIST, or that National Institute of Standards and Technology. And think of that one as like building on our cybersecurity posture or taking us to the level, to the next level. And both of these are kind of like report cards. So you can kind of think of them of how well is Tempe doing as far as cybersecurity goes. Now I'm going to introduce Scott, and he's going to take it away from here. Scott?
All right, Mark, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Why does this measure matter? What I'd like to do is take a complicated cybersecurity framework and put it in basically terms of something that we use and interact with every day. And that would be how we would grow a garden. And so in some ways, we need to look at our garden or the plant we're growing or nurturing in such a way that as we would a security and privacy program. Next slide, please. So in many ways, when we look at how effective we are at growing a garden, there's aspects like pest control. Is the dirt moist or is it dry? Are we growing a plant inside or outside? Are the plants, foliage currently wet or dry? What's its temperament? And how much direct sunlight influences the plant in many ways like an ecosystem? And the NIST CSF is no different. Next slide, please. With regard to this in this report card, and we'll go into the framework in a little bit of detail, what the outcome of our self-assessments and our third-party assessments help us do is quantify risk in the environment and then partner with departments to manage or mitigate that risk. And a big reason we do this are the implications of a cyber attack. The risk is so high or detrimental that, a hacker, or what could be called a threat actor, but, hacker would take over infrastructure. So that could be a component of the water, wastewater service delivery, the transportation system or scheduling. And so in many ways, there's potential damage to public reputation. If a given department's line of business application is compromised, resulting in data leak or something of that nature. There's also the implications of financial ransomware. And we've seen this really hit the medical and public sector organizations in recent months. And then there is the destruction or loss of data. So an organization comes in and responds, but as a part of that response, while they get the actual function going, they lose the historic data or metrics or metadata needed to help make basically timely and adapt decisions. Next slide, please. So in here are two examples. On the left are examples where City of Tempe presents itself as a target to hackers. And on the right is where you as an individual actually present a threat surface, using the terminology, to a hacker. And so the example is posting on social media when you're out of town, or that you're at a friend's house for a period of time, or other kinds of postings that basically give somebody an indication that property is more or less available to be looked at or taken. And so in that same kind of regard, regarding the city side, there was a recent breach here in 2021, and all of these examples on the left side are this calendar year alone. So a water treatment plant that had unpatched systems that resulted in basically a hacker being able to jiggle a doorknob and get authorized access without even a named account on the system. There's Microsoft Exchange, and that's terminology for what the Tempe municipal email system runs on behind the scenes. A zero-day vulnerability had been exploited in the wild. Information was shared by some of our partner organizations that we work with to make sure we have an iron sharpens iron strong program, and we were able to take action there prior to an event occurring. There's instances where credentials, that's a username and password, are for sale on the dark web. And so when this happens, we want to reach out to individuals that we know or are aware that these credentials work on city systems, and have them immediately change or lock out if we can't get a hold of them until we are able to. There's SolarWinds, which is a tool that helps you administer your network and all of its connected functions. So you can really inventory and optimize a large network. And when you talk about a municipal agency operating utilities, business, emergency services, you can understand a tool like this is very useful for the IT team to force multiply in how it can then assign resources to make the network efficient and basically root out issues. That particular issue presented another threat surface for a hacker outside an organization to try to get in and get a foothold. And then our last example is very newsworthy in the East Coast, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. It basically started through an email that was presenting a scam. Employees of the company clicked that email, provided their corporate username and password, and the rest is history. The threat actors got in, they're a part of a criminal syndicate. It was highly organized. Next slide, please. So now just taking a glance at the NIST cybersecurity framework itself, there's a couple hundred controls in this framework, but they all boil down to these 5 areas. And so when you look at these areas and you start your program and you begin doing your assessments or comparing with other organizations, sharing a lesson learned with another organization, etc., these are the main takeaways. So this is the thing, if nothing else around the framework gets across here, this would be it. Have we identified our assets? That's both critical infrastructure and information types. So an example would be a file of community member data stored or maintained by the court, or critical infrastructure utilized by water, wastewater. Then what we want to do, as we've identified the criticality of information, is then align protections that adequately protect in a cost-effective and efficient nature that data. So the, kind of a non-technical example here would be, we don't want to put toothpicks in a bank vault, but we absolutely want our gold bullion to be, with adequate protection around it. So this could be network segmentation, user access controls, and auditing various processes around onboarding and offboarding of access and integration of applications. Next is the detect measure. Here what we're measuring is IT teams and departmental teams as they're related in the delivery of the technology, what their consistent response is when a protective measure has triggered. So there's an alert, and did the alert generate in something being blocked or something being allowed? What additional follow-ups are needed? Another example here could be a computer that somehow gets malware on it, and going through and making sure that the computer is more or less cleaned, well, first contained, then responded to, and that kind of leads right into our next measure. How are we consistently responding to cyber events? And now event is a tricky term. Not every event requires necessarily a response. An example would be another adversary out on the internet just running a generic scan isn't necessarily presenting itself a threat. It's also rather common in today's day and age. But there would be a different level of response if suddenly credentials got into a city line of business system from a geographic area that is not normally expected. And then there's the recovery aspect. So in this aspect, how long does it take IT related functions and departments we serve to have a recovery when there is a significant event involving a system like this? So while each of these 5 measures have many different processes tied under them, what I want to point out is what we're measuring is control maturity. We start qualitative, and then based on risk or from the identify stage, it helps us determine a value. Then we'll march on to quantitative risk as that process matures. But again, we don't want to do that level of essentially a quantitative risk measurement on data that is meant to be either less valuable or doesn't require that level of protection. I also want to highlight as a part of this that the agencies pictured around that circle help City of Tempe collaborate on the program strategically, but then also tactically with regard to events going on in and around our organization. And there's instances where we've had observations that we've been able to share as well. Next slide, please. When that assessment is completed, and that's something that IT is doing hand in hand with the departmental stakeholder, it helps us take that report card and then create a security game playbook known as a priority action map, which is really, these are the big risks and the big wins that need to be managed or mitigated first. Are there compensative or mitigative controls? And that helps us then align to manage that risk proactively. We desire to align with departmental framework touchpoint. That essentially is to really show and share IT and information security coming in and being that partner related entity that can have these kind of critical conversations around a gap, whether the gap is in a business process or in an IT process. And then together we prioritize when we can address it. I'll highlight an aspect of the current information security and privacy program. It's the vulnerability management program. Here, what we're doing is we're proactively training users on essentially security awareness techniques, also hacker tricks, the email phishing, the text message scams, these kind of other tricks that are used by hackers to kind of basically just ask someone for their credentials or get a response, and then they'll lure them in and down the black hole of a scam. Then we'll also scan and track technical vulnerabilities. And here what we're looking for are what systems are aging, or what can be called in the industry technical debt that's accruing. As systems age and become more vulnerable, are there compensative controls, or do we just simply update these systems, or do they age out of the environment? And lastly, there's agency and supply chain reputation monitoring. And this is a newer aspect where we're looking at agencies that are connected to us, both through supply chain or through mutual area sharing of data for services. And when there's a particular flaw, proactively engaging them so that they're a part of the conversation in risk reduction. Oftentimes, an issue with them results in access to a city system, and that's something we'd like to prevent. Next slide, please. With regard to this measure and it being accelerated, there are two lines that I'd like to point out here. In gray is the current trajectory of the program, and the teal line shows what an increased investment near term does by giving a few foundational aspects to the program to make the team of information security and IT more effective at operating the environment, but also securing the environment, and then baselining so we can make determinations on deviations. That's very interesting when you're looking for that hacker in the environment and you have an understanding of what to expect. Next slide, please. Here, what we want to highlight is that there are, as it relates to the attacks or internet scam actions out there, that basically young adults, those that have had technology their entire life, and seniors, those that have adapted to technology over time, are more likely to fall victim to a hacker statistically. And so a way that Tempe aligns to help is that we'll promote awareness. And that's through not only the security training, but also email phishing related activities that we're sending out that will train an individual if they click, or reward an individual if they report. Basically letting them know that they busted us, checking in on them and their posture, and that they're a cyber warrior on the front line with us to help secure the environment. Then there's aligning best practices within technology using current threat vectors. And so a few slides ago on that, Tempe is a target. There's lessons learned from each of those events that are either at various degrees of maturity here at Tempe that will then be able to influence our next assessment and then our priority action roadmap true up. And then really here is, regardless of the business system, regardless of the application, when we talk about the data's identity or classification level, all data is treated equitably at Tempe. Next slide, please. Long-term strategies, we desire to measure and align IT and departmental expectations, and this is a threefold goal. It's culture, process, and tools. Culture involves how we include and empower employees to participate, sharing concerns or sharing accolades to help give us accurate information to drive the assessment so we can focus where we need to. And that common understanding that we're coming to have a conversation around either things are really well managed, or if there's a gap, let's be in alignment to reduce the gap. There's our internal strategic, that's our IT to departmental level priority action map goal setting levels. Then there's tactical efforts. So that could be where there's a detection or a response or a recovery. Then there's also external, both strategic and tactical efforts. And this is where City of Tempe is working with other city, county, state, and tribal entities to share indicators of compromise so others can learn from us and that we can reap the benefit of them having a cyber event proactively. We know what that particular hacker's doing and we can stop it in advance because it was shared with us. As it relates to process, here's where we'll go through those 5 aspects of the control and in certain cases have additional conversations with departmental stakeholders around can we come in or see maybe a process that's non-technical in nature, but that itself influences the ability for the compliance metric to increase. So this is to say not everything in this compliance metric happens on a computer screen. It's actually protecting the information and the infrastructure holistically. And the last component are the technical tools. And here we're going to do periodic review of the effectiveness and efficiency to operate these tools. Next slide, please. On the short term, it's our goal to improve our posture compliance based on the highest risk to the organization. With regard to the priority action map receiving a go-ahead to be accelerated, 2 huge foundational aspects in the program to mature short term are the event management program. This takes a lot of logs that different teams interact with and puts it under a single pane of glass. And now additional automation and comparison are available. In addition, teams that come together and are manually exchanging or collaborating on data will be able to see more about what's going on across the aisle, and then that may lead to proactive discussions. So it's that whole thing of you may see something and know it impacts 3 teams, but the single pane of glass is showing a particular team might be better apt to lead the conversation or take a glance before the alignment occurs. That's what this particular tool would do. In addition, that tool, with its increased visibility of the environment, helps us measure and enforce data loss prevention controls in a more effective manner than doing data loss prevention for one particular application or another. Next, we want to develop a more robust vulnerability management program. So this is the monitoring and coaching of our supply chain and neighboring entities because they're connected to us. What they're doing matters too, and we want to hold them accountable. We also want to hold ourselves accountable by scanning our own environment. And then, of course, this leads into that particular framework's feedback loop of collaboration, assessment, and aligning IT with the department on the roadmap. Next slide, please. What I'd like to leave you with is this particular example regarding information security and privacy measures. If you're doing next year what you're doing this year, you're probably going to be, like on the left side of this slide, losing a little bit of pace because your systems are aging, the software ages, and network controls or what we'll call lateral threat surface increases. And so if you're just looking to operate, then the hacker is only gaining time and time and opportunity, I should say, also to wreak havoc on the environment. On the right side, making that investment, increasing it, allows for innovation and improvements. It also keeps up with the current, criminal-related cybersecurity hacker, syndicates and groups out there. And as a result, we're able to stay ahead of what's happening. And once you do that, it's a lot like actual crime prevention on the physical plane. That house with the sign that says there's an alarm system here to a normal burglar is probably not going to be statistically as targeted as one without. And so if we present enough of a hardened surface, that threat actor or hacker is just going to move on to the next system. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time and attention. I look forward to your questions and continued collaboration. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Scott. We appreciate your presentation today. I'm Wydell Holmes. I'm with the Strategic Management and Diversity Office, and I'd like to share with you some questions that we have from our audience. And the first question that I'd like to share is in regards to protecting someone's home computer. So in their interactions with the city, they may be paying a water bill, they may be sending an email. What are the strategies one can do to protect their home computer?
Oh, great, Wydell. That's a really good question. I would say the first thing that you want to do is that you want to make sure that your computer's up to date, whether it's your your Windows machine or your iPad or whatever, but you want to keep your operating system and all your applications up to date. I'd also recommend that you install like virus and malware protection of some sort. And then the other big thing is your password. I mean, you want to create a good, nice, strong password, something that's at least 8 characters in length, has letters, numbers, and is not something easy to guess like your dog name or a birthday or something like that. I would also recommend don't reuse the passwords, and especially on your banking stuff. And then the last thing I'd say is Scott kind of talked about the pipeline example and how that was a social attack. You know, banks are never going to call you and ask you for your username and password. That'll just never happen. And if they do call you, I'd recommend saying that you'll just call them back on the number on the back of the card. But those are just a couple of like little tips and tricks for keeping your machine safe.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Also, a reminder to our audience, if they would like to participate in the discussion, which we really welcome you to do, to submit your questions in the chat feature located in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Another question that we have for our presenters is there's a lot of data flowing in Tempe. How much is it? And then how do you protect that?
All right, I can take I'll take this question on, Mark. As it relates to data and what goes on, there are periodic reviews where we'll just come through and look at tools over time. And so a recent thing, it's in excess of 120 gigabytes in 3 months. So if you're looking at, the kind of operation in that, something else I'd highlight from that is there's about 1 million times per week that there's a network related scan that occurs, and that's basically a hacker trying to inventory the system and then come back or look at online resources to figure out if there's then a way to circumvent the controls available to that. There's about, in that same report, there's about 20,000 emails per week that are just blocked outright at the email filter. And of the ones that get through, because not every measure is perfect, there's about 12 software-based attacks blocked per week. So identified and blocked. And that's over that specific 90-day reporting period.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate that. So just as a reminder, we have another presentation, but we would love your feedback and your suggestions. Please feel free to contact Mark or Scott at the information that you see on your screen, as well as to complete the survey or see future sessions at tempe.gov/Tempe Accelerates. With that, I'll turn it over to our city manager, Andrew Ching.
Right. Thank you very much, Wydell. We do have a second presentation today regarding performance measure 5.14, audit completion rate. We will be hearing from Keith Smith and Bill Green from our city auditor's office. Take it away.
Thanks, Andrew. My name is Keith Smith. I'm a senior auditor with the Internal Audit Office.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Green, and I'm the city auditor for the city of Tempe. And let's go ahead and get started. As Andrew mentioned, we're here to talk about performance measure 5.14, the audit completion rate. And so you don't have to listen to me too long. Keith and I are going to split up the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the first half, and then Keith's going to wrap up the second half. Next slide, please. So performance measure 5.14 states, as shown on the slide here, achieve a completion rate greater than or equal to 90% of the projects included on the approved annual risk assessment and audit plan to ensure adequate audit coverage and risk reduction throughout the city. And this performance measure supports the strategic priority of financial stability and vitality. So during our presentation, we're going to talk a little more about how our ability to complete a higher percentage supports this strategic priority. Keith and I also will share some information about how this measure is calculated, why it's important, our current target. We're going to update you on the most recent results that we've got, talk a little bit about strategies we use to help achieve the goal, as well as some of the corresponding challenges. Next slide, please. So why does this measure matter? To understand that, I think really it's useful to understand and discuss exactly what an audit plan is and how it's developed. So simply stated, an audit plan is a listing of all the projects that the internal audit office wants to complete during the fiscal year. So the plan is really important because it helps and represents kind of the roadmap for us to help to deploy our audit resources, which are limited, as they always are, in Tempe, which is a very large and complex organization. So when deciding what to include in the plan, we used what's called a risk-based approach. So this means that we use a mixture of science and professional judgment to select the projects to include in the plan. Some of the steps that we use to identify potential projects might include identifying risks common to local governments. We do some analysis of the city's financial information. We review programs and organizational structure, identify audits and projects performed by other audit shops in local jurisdictions. We'll interview city management, and we survey city employees. And we come up with our own set of ideas as we kind of go about our business throughout the year. So through that process, we identify, as you can imagine, lots of potential projects. In fact, many more than we can actually do. So to help shorten the list, we apply risk ranking and risk criteria to help see what we can focus on. So risk factors that we might apply include, what's the risk of financial loss, risk of negative public perception, the risk of loss of efficiency and productivity. How well do these potential projects align with industry risks and emerging risks that we've seen? What's the length of time it's been since the last audit? So after we apply those criteria, and based on that, we kind of see what rises to the top of the list and how much we think we can get done in the year. And then those items are included in the plan. So at the end of this process, our goal really is to have projects on the plan that address some of the city of Tempe's highest risk areas. So all of this information leads to our measure, and again, why it matters. It really matters because achievement of our goal to complete 90% of our plan helps ensure that our office focuses and provides the city with the most comprehensive audit coverage possible with the available resources. So stated another way, focusing on completing as many of these projects as possible helps ensure that our audit coverage is on the highest risk areas and supports the city council priority of financial stability and vitality. Next slide, please. So, in further understanding why it matters, it's really useful to also maybe establish a common definition of internal audit. I think it's really common for folks when they hear the word audit or auditors, a lot of people will think of tax audit. We're not tax auditors. Internal auditing is different. In the unlikely event that you looked up this term or were reading an auditing journal, it's formally defined as an activity performed by professionals that provides reasonable assurance that 1, internal controls in place are appropriate to lessen risks, 2, governance processes are working and efficient, and 3, organizational goals and objectives are accomplished. So if you cut through all that jargon, really the bottom line is that internal auditing is a process to make sure that the organization, in this case the city of Tempe, that the assets that we have are safeguarded and properly managed. And really it's just a fancy term to help describe an independent and objective process for evaluating programs, processes, and information. So why is that important? Why is auditing important? Really because it promotes good business processes. So the Internal Audit Office evaluates and reviews processes and programs throughout the city. This could include our contractors, our nonprofit partners. And as a result of these reviews, we will typically make recommendations to improve processes and help make sure that we achieve our objectives, whatever those might be. So to help picture maybe a little clearly and what that means, project-wise, audits can cover anything from reviewing cash handling practices at the golf course to making sure that we have good procedures in place to accurately and completely bill everyone for ambulance transports. We could be evaluating the city's programs for complying with banking rules for processing credit card transactions. So any number of projects anywhere throughout the city. Next slide. So what's our target? What's our goal? Our goal is to complete 90% of the projects we include on the audit plan. There's really no mystery here in terms of how that's calculated. We take the number of projects issued final during the year, that fiscal year, and we divide it by the number of projects included on the plan, and that gives us a percentage of those completed. So when we established this measure, our baseline completion rate was 56% in fiscal year 2017-18. You know, things always change from the time you develop a plan till the time you actually start executing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we discuss challenges. And we know we're not going to complete the whole plan, but so, you know, as a result, 90% would be considered a pretty aggressive goal, but gives us a little bit of flexibility to react to unanticipated projects that come out throughout the year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith, and he's going to take us from here.
Okay, so you can turn it to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about where we are right now. So as of the last update for fiscal year 19-20, we achieved almost a 73% completion rate, which is a significant improvement from our baseline year of 2017-18 when we achieved about a 56% completion rate. So this is an annual measure, and it's aligned with the city's fiscal year, July through June. So we won't have another update on the completion rate until July of 2021. Next slide. So this slide demonstrates how each year the audit plan can be different depending on the nature and size of the audit's projects. So you'll notice on this table that each year has a different number of planned projects. The number of planned projects really varies depending on the mix of projects and our estimate of the staff time required to complete each project. So in other words, you know, not every audit project is the same. For instance, a simple cash handling review of a small point of sale operation is significantly less complex and time consuming than, say, a review of the police department's body-worn camera program, where in that case we're comparing a complex set of policies to the national standards. We would be reviewing compliance with those policies, and we'd be analyzing control processes for improvement for a very large program. Next slide. So there are several key strategies that we've identified and that we pursue on an ongoing basis to help us have the best chance possible to achieve our target goal. So I'm going to go over 4 of these strategies. The first is adequate resources and training. So we're a small staff of 3.5, and so it's very important to ensure that we fill any staff vacancies as quickly as possible, as a lack of even one person on our staff can impact the plan significantly. It's also important that staff's provided the resources they need to effectively do the work, including knowledge. So we dedicate a considerable amount of time and our budget to ongoing professional training and development. So the next strategy would be for internal audit function to be successful, it's critical to have the support and the endorsement from the city manager and to have an audit committee. So the audit committee is really recognized as a best practice in our industry. We're fortunate here in Tempe to have the full support of the city manager's office. And in addition, the mayor and council recently approved the city's first audit committee, and we had our first meeting a couple months ago. So the audit committee is comprised of 2 council members, 3 community members, the city manager, and the deputy city manager CFO. And it just really provides an additional level of governance and support for the internal audit office. So the third strategy is it's very important for us to collaborate with city staff during our projects. We really can't be successful without the support of our client departments. So again, we're very fortunate here in Tempe to have employees who really support us during our projects, and it's really the folks who do the job day in and day out that often have the best ideas for how to make improvements. And lastly, in a project-based environment like the Internal Audit Office, our time is really our biggest asset. So it's important to have effective project management techniques that promote the efficient use of our staff time, and that we use any and all available audit tools and technology to make us more effective. Next slide. So I want to talk about some challenges that we face every day in hitting our target. So most of them can be related to the unknowns that happen after our audit plan is already created and approved. So the first challenge I would talk about is that priorities often change throughout the year. So our audit plan is created before the fiscal year even starts, but oftentimes higher priority projects pop up later that we didn't plan for. So it's important that we be responsive and address these high priority items, even if they weren't included on our plan. Secondly, we discussed this issue a little bit earlier, but that is staff turnover or reassignment of staff. For instance, last year, we had an employee accept a long-term reassignment to another function within the city. So we had to work hard to quickly hire a temporary auditor to fill in for his absence. Another challenge is the schedule of our audit clients. So often the dates that we may plan to conduct projects can conflict with the client department priorities. So our work can consume a fair amount of other people's time. So sometimes we have to shuffle things around a little bit to make it work for everyone. So this means, oftentimes things don't go according to the schedule. And the last challenge is that sometimes audit projects are more complicated than we expect and just take more time than we plan for. So our project budgets are based on experience and represent as our best guess at the time, but sometimes we just miss the mark. So next slide. So here is our contact information. So that really concludes our presentation. We appreciate your attention, and we look forward to your ideas and questions.
Thank you, Keith and Bill. This is Wydell Holmes again with the City of Tempe Strategic Management Diversity Office. And we do have a few questions for you. You mentioned the audit committee. So what are the strategies that are being utilized by the audit committee? What's their strategic role?
Thanks, Wydell. This is Bill. I'll take that question. And I think, as Keith mentioned, the audit committee is a best practice. And I think first and foremost, it really helps the mayor and council meet their fiduciary responsibility in providing the governance over the city's financial system, controls, and the audit process at a level that would be difficult for the entire mayor and council. So that's certainly one of their strategy and roles. In terms of the nuts and bolts of what they do, they receive copies of all the external audit reports and internal audit reports that are completed, and it would get any kind of presentations that go along with that if requested. One important thing is we talked about the audit plan because that's a fundamental component of this measure. So one of the roles and responsibilities of the audit committee is to review and adopt the annual audit plan that we talked about. And so, we present the audit plan to them at the end of the fiscal year to get their feedback, get their questions, get their perspectives on things, and make sure that they're comfortable with the projects that we included on there. So they give us kind of a third-party perspective with that. They will be responsible for reviewing the status of audit recommendations, and really, they provide an additional layer of governance and independence for our office by providing an open meeting and forum for communications on all things audit. And so, I guess lastly, I want to mention that they're certainly fundamentally involved in sort of giving us feedback on our performance and our compliance with audit standards.
Great. So thank you, Bill. I have two questions related to your response. You mentioned that the strategic role of the audit committee, one of their roles is to help with the implementation or the status of the implementation of your suggestions or your findings of the audit. So what strategies does your office use to increase the percentage of recommendations that will actually get implemented by the departments or by the business unit?
Great. Keith, you want to grab that one? Oh, Keith. Can't hear you, Keith. I guess I can do it. Keith, you can jump in. May have had some connectivity problems there. I think in terms of the strategy for me, in terms of getting a higher percentage of audit recommendations accepted, starts with the collaboration piece that Keith started about or talked about during his presentation. And the fact is, you could be the smartest auditor in the world, but if you're viewed as cramming a recommendation down somebody's throat, as opposed to saying, hey, we've identified this issue let's work together to come up with a solution. The latter obviously works better. And so we work collaboratively with our client departments to suggest recommendations that make sense to them, that they can buy into, and then therefore have a higher level of chance of getting implemented.
Thank you. You mentioned the other role of the audit committee is to, oversee or give you feedback on your work. You audit other departments, but who audits the auditors?
Okay, I could take this one, Bill. So the government auditing standards, or the yellow book as we call it, they require a peer review every 3 years. So a group of our audit peers would come out and review our policies and procedures and our audit work papers for compliance with these yellow book standards. And most likely a peer review group would be like someone from like the Association of Local Government Auditors. So really other auditors are the ones that are doing our peer review and kind of auditing our office.
Okay, thank you. Similar to Mark and Scott's presentation about what one can do to protect themselves and the city's assets from cybercrime, what are some of the key activities the department can do or strategies they can take to reduce risk?
I'll jump in here, Waddell. That's always a great question. We get asked that a lot. I think it begins with an employee's understanding and responsibility on how they fit in with the control structure. So what they do is important. What they do is important to making sure you achieve objectives. And so understanding your role in the organization, understanding that it's important that you do these activities, and correspondingly, if you're a person that's a key person, and many are, right? So that if you're not here and somebody else has to pick up and take up where you left off, are you documenting those things that you do that are of critical importance to the organization so that somebody can pick them up and do them in your absence? So I think those two things, one, understanding the importance that everyone and every employee in the city of Tempe has for achieving our objectives, and two, making sure that they are putting controls and systems and processes in place that somebody else can come up and pick up in their absence.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a question from one of our viewers, and we thank you for being here, is how do you work with city departments who use outside auditing agencies for purposes of accreditation, or is this separate completely from your office?
I think, it's mostly separate, except that I would ask that if we become aware of them. So for instance, I'll use the court as an example. A municipal court is required to do what's called a minimum accounting standards every 3 years, and they use an outside party to do that. In large part because we just don't have enough resources to go around to do all of those external reviews required for compliance. We just ask that departments let us know that those are going on. In some cases, we can work in a coordinating fashion with the external reviewers. And then we also like to know, the results of those so that we can kind of feed that information into our risk database, that we can make sure that if there are significant items identified for improvement, that information would be passed on to the audit committee.
Okay, great, thank you. I do have a question for our cybersecurity team that came in from our audience. And basically the question is there a password keeper app or program that city employees can use to keep all of our passwords secure? What would you recommend for that?
All right, hi there.
That's good. Oh, you want to take that one, Scott?
I'm happy to. As it relates to city employees, there's a brand new login application tied currently into the Office 365 group of apps. And that particular portal, once you're in there, has in itself for City of Tempe related function, an ability for an employee to just have like a password locker right there. So it's a thing you're already using to sign in. When you sign in, here's the menu of applications that that you either frequently use or want to see right here, and then your actual passwords are also kept securely in there. As it relates for beyond the city's use, there are a few third-party apps out there that provide this function. Something I would just recommend, and I know was mentioned a little earlier by Mark, is to not follow the practice of what's called credential reuse. That's the same email address and password on numerous websites, because when any one of those websites is compromised, the next day people are trying those passwords and email address combination on just a random cadre of other sites, and then they figure out which ones work, and you get out of bed and there's already, you know, all kinds of random emails and things going on. And to that end, Mark, do you have anything to add?
I would just say that I use a one called Password Keeper. It's free, and you can keep bank passwords, your passwords to your machines. It's all encrypted, so that would be just another option as well.
Great. Well, thank you all. I'd like to turn this back over to our city manager in regards to some announcements for our next Tempe Accelerates.
Thank you, Wydell, and thank you to Keith and to Bill for that presentation. Yes, we will be back. We will be back doing Accelerates again on June 3rd, and it will also be at 2 p.m. Join us then for Performance Measure 3.21, Veteran Supportive Community Designation, and 3.32, Patient Advocate Services. You can see a full list of upcoming sessions. We have it up on the screen, and you can always go to www.tempe.gov/Tempe Accelerates for a lot more information about this series of programs. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to all the presenters today. Really great stuff. A great look at all the different types of work that the city does, and important work to keep our information systems and our technology safe, and also to ensure some really top-notch oversight of our operations through our audit function and their capable leadership. Thank you, of course, to Megan Hutchison, as always, for making sure that this production goes off without a hitch, and appreciate you all, and we will see you next time. Thank you.